an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Gravity Falls, Season 1, Episodes 4 and 5, The Hand That Rocks the Mabel, and The Inconveniencing. In these episodes, Dipper is getting a crush on Wendy and tries to impress her and winds up falling prey to a group of convenience store ghosts, as you do. And there is a tiny little mentalist that decides that he has to have Mabel for his queen. It's terrible. That was a good episode, but it's terrible. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Devin for commissioning these two episodes. So yeah, guys, The Hand That Rocks the Mabel is episode 4, the first one out of the two. And it is, I actually commented about this in one of the other groups that I'm in, that I was impressed at how it sort of foreshadows what's going on. Not even foreshadows. It just does a good job of sort of depicting what it's like when you come across somebody who is like not respectful of your boundaries and is creepy in a way that other people just don't seem to see unless they know the context of how you two know each other. So it starts off with us finding out we have Grunkle Stan, who has his magical sack of mystery that you put money in it and it disappears, never to be seen again. And all these people shove their money into it. But inside, they are watching television and an advertisement comes on for this other dude named Gideon. And it says, "Are you completely miserable?" And there's some guy sobbing, crying, and he says, "Yes, then you need to meet Gideon." And we get to see, it's just a silhouette that makes him look like he's full grown, but we find out that he is a very, very tiny person. And he says other so-called men of mystery are frauds, and we see film footage of Grunkle Stan coming out of his basically porta potty with toilet paper stuck to his shoe, and then a tent with like an Illuminati style eye over it, which I just really love that there are eyes in the motif of the show all over the place. And Grunkle Stan hears the commercial and is very irritated because he feels like Gideon is ruining everything for him. And we, of course, assume that this means his business, but then we cut to Gideon taking his parking place. That's the extent of it. That's what's got him so angry. And he tells them that they are not allowed to go and see Gideon, but of course they go and do it anyway. So I love the joke where Mabel says, "I found a loophole," and she literally pulls a loophole out of her pocket. Listen, if I were to try and tell you guys that I didn't consider making something like that to copy this joke in person with Owen, I'd be lying. Because I really want to do it. Because it's so stupid. Oh, God, I'm sorry. There was some dumb joke yesterday. Owen was trying to tell me about some like short skits that he saw. And he kept on calling them. He was talking about a couple of actors, and he was like, "Yeah, and both of them were in these shorts." And I was like, "Shorts? Really? That doesn't seem very flattering on those two." And he stopped and stared at me. And then he tried to continue, and he was like, yeah, but then later on, somebody came along and sort of like ripped off those shorts by doing it. And I was like, ripped them off? Why would they do that? And he got so angry. And I love when I get him angry like that, because he interrupts me with terrible jokes a lot, and I rarely get the opportunity to do it back. And I felt very satisfied by that. So having a loophole like this, I feel like would really accomplish that. So they go to see Gideon. And it turns out that he is a very, very small man who we find out later that he actually does have some crazy psychic powers, but he doesn't use those in front of the audience for whatever reason. He only does really like goofy shit that it's easy to point to why he would know certain things, so that he seems like the kind of shyster that just, is able to observe and then report, basically. Only he is reporting back to the people that he is observing, and they don't realize how transparent they are. But I love this whole premise because Gideon is just such a great sort of send up of this type of, what's the word? This type of religious tent preacher. And his real powers aren't on brand with cute and whittle, says Melanie. Yeah, I guess that's what it is, huh? It's that he has a very specific brand that he's cultivating. I really wonder how long he's going to stay whittle. Like, how long does he get to capitalize on this? But he doesn't seem too concerned about that, because he yells at his father at one point, "I can buy and sell you, old man," which is really one of the most fantastic lines of the entire episode. But yeah, the whole like reveal of who he is and how tiny and like affable he seems is kind of a shock to Dipper, who is expecting him to be obviously a full-grown adult man with all kinds of clout behind him. But instead, he's just sort of like a superficially charming goofball. And he turns and like looks at the crowd with these like baby eyes, and everybody goes, "Aww," even though I find it very creepy, but they think it's an awe-worthy moment. And his father is off playing the piano for him to the side as he begins to sing his song about how he can see what others can't see. So all of this is the introduction to this guy before he decides that he is going to try and date Mabel. And it's a pretty good moment of him like pointing to Mabel and being like, "Something tells me your name's Mabel." And she says, "How did he do that?" And she turns and looks at the camera, and she's wearing a sweater that says Mabel across the front, which I have a question, actually. The beginning of the episode, when we have like the opening credits, when Mabel plugs in a sweater and she's standing there with her arms open, looking very happy with her plugged in blinking sweater. Is that just for the opening credits, or does that happen within an episode? And you don't have to tell me which episode or anything, but Owen and I were trying to decide whether or not the opening credits were a series of moments from actual episodes, or if they were invented moments simply for the opening credits that were supposed to give you an overall vibe of what the show is. And I have to say, I don't care about any of the other moments at all, if they're real or not, except for Mabel in her blinking Mabel sweater. That I really want to be real very, very badly. So, let me know. Anyway, so he is cheering on the whole audience, and Mabel has completely fallen for this whole shtick. And he watches Mabel leaving, and he winds up coming to the door and asking her out on a date. But Mabel doesn't understand that this is meant to be a date. And it's interesting because, we see her being boy crazy a couple of times and being interested in going on dates. it's not like that's not on her mind. But the fact that it doesn't even occur to her that Gideon could be interested in her romantically, I can't decide if it's just because he's so tiny and seems like a child to her, even though she is a child. I can't decide if it's that she's so not attracted to him in that way that it didn't enter her head, or I can't decide if it's that she thinks that he is like so flamboyant that he must be gay, and so she doesn't think that he's interested in her in that way. Because honestly, that last one is really what feels the most true to me, but the show doesn't seem like it's going to be interested in, like, you know, looking at what that means. So I feel like we're supposed to think the first one, that she's just so not attracted to him that it doesn't enter her mind he could see her that way. But I really get the feeling that she thought you were just going to be this gay friend of mine that did makeovers and went shopping with me, and it turns out that you're into me, and I don't really know what to do with that. Melanie says she said she likes him like a friend / little sister. Yeah, I mean, I get that she says that later, but I don't like the fact that he asks her out and she doesn't sense that's what he's doing is the part that I find funny, because she jumps to this immediately with other males that she's, you know, that she's approached by. But yeah, he says that you seem like somebody who appreciates the sparkly things in life. And as he says this, she had been bedazzling her face, and she coughs all of these bedazzled bits out as she says that, and they land right on his lapels and bedazzle his lapels, which is amazing to me. I love it so much. I don't know, he says about Grunkle Stan, I don't know how a lemon so sour could be related to a peach so sweet. That's a good line. So, yeah, when he says, perhaps we can get away from here, and he says, maybe to my dressing room, and he says it in such a way that Mabel, I feel like, would have picked up on this, but for him, it just doesn't register at all, and she's just like, oh, makeovers, and doesn't hear what tone he took. And he takes her to his dressing room, and it is amazing. It's the best thing I've ever seen. Like, the moment that Mabel sees it and her face just lights up, that is 100% how I would be. Guys, this kind of thing is my jam. It's my jam. And Gideon says to her, do you see something you like? 'Cause I do. And gives her a look, and she just sort of laughs and goes, what? And doesn't get it. Again, I'm like, Mabel, what are you doing? This feels a tiny bit out of character for her, but okay, it's fine. So she goes home, and she's got fucking these long, crazy nails. She's got her hair done in one of those, like, I used to call them something. They're like a Twinkie. It looks like, do you guys remember this in the 90s when girls had bangs like this that were almost a perfect, like, tube, like it had been curled around a toilet paper tube? That was really in style for a minute, and I just remember always looking at it and just being like, I don't understand who thinks this looks good. But it was definitely, like, there were multiple girls at my school who wore their hair that way. And you know, it looks like she has extensions in. Her hair is like almost hitting the floor on the back, and tons of makeup on and everything. And she says, I was hanging out with my new pal Gideon. He is one dapper little man. And Dipper says, I don't trust anyone whose hair is bigger than their head, which I don't feel like is a terrible policy. I'm just saying. And she says, you know what? Shut up, because you never want to do girly stuff with me. You and Seuss get to do boy stuff all the time. And he says, what do you mean? And Seuss comes running up and says, hey, dude, you ready to blow up these hot dogs in the microwave one by one? And this is one of those moments where I'm like, I understand that the idea of assigning gender to activities like this isn't really the point. Like there are plenty of little girls, myself being among them, who would have really enjoyed to watch the hot dogs blow up in the microwave. But stereotypically, doing stupid things like that is considered boy stuff. I mean, I don't agree, but for the sake of this show, it makes sense what they're trying to say. And, you know, it makes sense that Dipper would not be interested in messing around with makeup and hair stuff. Like, they probably don't even have the kind of things that they would need to do this in the first place. So they go running off, and we are immediately understanding exactly what it is that's going on with Mabel, feeling like she's finally got a friend like this, you know? So they are hanging out on top of her parents' factory, and they have their opera glasses with them. And this is when we get the first real sense of who Gideon is, with him saying, "I feel like king of all I survey, and you can be my queen." And again, Mabel, what? You're being so nice to me right now. Quit it. Not picking up on what it is that he is saying. Again, I'm speaking from the heart. I've never felt this close with anyone. So close. And starts to touch her hair. And she says, "I like you a lot, but let's just be friends." And he says, "Just give me a chance. Go on one date with me." And a play date, a shopping date. And he says, "It'll just be one little old date, I swear on my lucky bolo tie." And he gives her that cute little kid face that does not seem like it should work in a romantic setting, but works for this. And goes very poorly. She tries to tell Dipper it's not a date. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, so I figured I'd throw him a bone. And Dipper says, "Mabel, guys don't work that way. He's going to fall in love with you." And she says, "Yeah, right. I'm not that lovable." And beats him in the next instant in their game. Now, this is one of those things where he says guys don't work that way. But the thing is about this, and again, I don't expect a cartoon to like deal with this, but guys do work this way in terms of them doing this to women as well. I have met plenty of guys who've gone on dates with women because they felt bad and not because they actually were that interested, and then they just ghosted them later. So saying guys don't work that way, it's not really that they don't understand what we're trying to do. It's that guys have a much bigger entitlement complex than women do. And they are much less likely to blame themselves for a date going badly or for not getting a call back than they are to blame the woman for that. So, in any case, she hears the doorbell ring and she goes to the door, and fucking Gideon is on a horse. And it's such a great illustration. He is sitting there with his feet not even past the saddle. Like, he just looks so ridiculous. It's so terrible. And he takes her to this really fancy restaurant. I love that his horse is still inside and it's like drinking from the fountain. And we see the horse like going up to people's plates in the background and eating off of people's tables. And the waiter comes up and says, Gideon, feet on the table. Excellent choice. And he says something about, what did we say about eye contact? And the waiter's like, yes. And breaks eye contact and then backs away from the table, staring around like a crazy person. It's a pretty weirdo moment that I really love. There is something about people demanding that others not look them in the eye that I have never not found hilarious, because it's just so incredibly pretentious and weird. And what he winds up doing here is asking her out on another date in front of everybody in this very high pressure way that would force her to say yes or else really look like the bad guy, especially because he's super famous. So everybody knows immediately who he is and they feel personally invested in it because of the fact that they know him. And this is something that, guys, I don't know how I have been friends with a couple of women who were dating guys like this, who were very controlling and who were also like really self-conscious and not totally sure of themselves. And they put their girlfriends in positions like this. Like 2 of my friends were proposed to in front of everyone when they had not been dating the guy for very long at all. And it was clear that the dude had like set it up this way, not because he wanted her friends and family to be involved in the proposal, but because he wanted her to feel like she couldn't say no in front of everybody. And that if she said no at the time, it would be really like a letdown for everybody who was involved in watching. And if she said no later, it would make her look like a liar or a coward. And I've seen this a couple of different times. Like it's just such a huge red flag. And I love the fact that nobody else really seems to get exactly what he's doing to her, because everybody has their own sort of like weird investment in him as a celebrity. And when Grunkle Stan finds out that he's dating her, he gets really upset. And then he goes and we like find out that they're in all of these little gossip rags in the newspaper and stuff because of him being famous. And he goes to talk to Gideon's dad. And it turns out that this is like a business deal that Gideon's father wants to set up, that they will have Gideon marry Mabel, and then Grunkle Stan will be able to also make a bunch of money off of it because they will be pooling their like, you know, sort of mysterious man, what's the word I want? Brands, I guess. And I love that when Grunkle Stan goes to see his dad, there's a statue of Gideon in the front garden as a cherub. I didn't catch it the first time. I was watching this with Owen, and he stopped and was like, "Did you see that?" I was like, "No, what?" Because I'd been looking down at my phone real quick. And he rewound it so that I could see it. And it's the creepiest. And I loved it. It was so good. So he is making this date with this dude behind her back. And Mabel feels like she absolutely has to say yes to this second date. And when she goes home, Dipper's like, well, at least it's over and you won't have to go out with him again. And she's like, don't I? And the next date is another way over the top thing. They go out on the lake and they're rowing their boat. And we have local kook who's actually doing it like he's a gondolier. And she's in the middle of trying to say, we're friends, buddies. And she says, mate. And he says, like, soulmate. And as he says that, a bunch of fireworks go off and spell out her name in the air. And local kook says, well, you can't say no to that. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, I found this to be really well done. And I love that he's doing stuff that if it were somebody that she was interested in, spelling out Mabel's name in pink fireworks is exactly her jam. Like, she would normally love this, but she can't even enjoy it because this guy is such a fucking pushy creep about it, you know? And that's part of what's tough about dating somebody who's like this, is that a lot of times they find out specifically what you like because they want to manipulate you with it. But initially, you don't realize that's what's happening. So the fact that they have taken the time to get to know you well enough to know that you like this and that feels like it's a sign that they really care about you. And it's not until a little bit later that you start to realize that this was purely information for their files, basically, so that they know what they can do to get on your good side if things go sour between the two of you, or, do something that to all of your friends is going to seem like, oh my God, he knows you so well. Look at how well, like, I just really love that aspect of this whole thing. And she says, he's so nice, but I can't keep doing this. I can't break his heart. I have no way out. I was in the friend zone, and before I knew what was happening, he pulled me into the romance zone. It was like quicksand. And I really, this whole thing is just so, she's saying he's really nice. He's not, though. But I think all of us, at least all of us ladies, can relate to feeling like somebody is being so nice to us that we can't say no, even when, taken at face value, what they're doing, when you really look at it, isn't nice. It's not. But they haven't done anything overtly terrible. So it's really difficult when you have been socialized, as women are, to be thankful for anybody being nice to you. It's difficult to turn that off and really see the truth about how somebody is treating you. So her continuing to be like, well, he's really nice. I don't want to hurt his feelings. She has been very clear more than once that she is not interested in him in this way, but he has not respected her or her feelings on this at all. Not even a little bit. And yet she's still calling him nice, when the fact that he's ignoring her boundaries makes him the opposite of nice. But, it's just, it's so frustrating. So Dipper's in the middle of telling her, don't worry, it's not like you have to marry him. And then Grunkle Stan comes in and says, you're going to have to marry Gideon. It's all part of my long-term deal with Buddy Gleeful. And he comes in wearing a fucking Team Gideon shirt. Grunkle Stan, what are you doing? So she finally asks Dipper to help her. And Dipper goes to Gideon to tell him, my sister doesn't want to see you anymore. And what Gideon hears is, you're coming between us. You don't like me, and you don't want me dating your sister, so you are the problem. Guys, again, I'm not trying to get too deep on a cartoon here, but this is classic, like, abuser behavior. They hear that somebody criticized them or saw through some bullshit that they said or did, and all of a sudden, they decide that that person has to be taken out of the picture. Now, because this is a cartoon, it's being played as a over-the-top, like, oh, I just have to murder Dipper and get him out of the way. But an abuser separates the person that they are trying to control from their friends. And they do that by instilling some sort of doubt in that person's mind that their friends are really even on their side. They don't know what it's really like between us. They just think that because they are not having a good time in their relationship. They're just jealous. They don't really know what it's like between us. And if they think that, maybe it's because you keep on complaining to them about me. And if you stop complaining to them about me, maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal. Like, this is what happens. And I feel really strongly about this sort of thing because it is so insidious. And I have seen it happen so many times. And it's just super, super gross to me because it seems so reasonable. And it's a way of gaslighting a woman into thinking that she is responsible for the fact that her friends don't like you. Not because you are unlikable, but because she is like wrong about the way that she talks about you. And you bypass right past, why is she complaining about you all the time? Maybe because there's something to complain about. And instead make it like, well, you shouldn't be airing our dirty laundry to your friends. And, again, it's just a really gross, insidious thing that we really have been socialized to believe that we are the problem so much of the time. So I just really like the whole way that this goes. And of course, it's silly because he winds up trying to literally kill Dipper, but it's also like not untrue representation of exactly how somebody who is an abuser's mind works and how they decide that they are going to take control over someone's life. So, we have him like going to, that one blog writer's name who's in love with the news anchor. And what is it that he gets him to do? Oh yeah. He asks Dipper to come down and do an interview because he's like pretending to be interested in weird things that Dipper has seen happening in Gravity Falls. And this gets Dipper to a location where Gideon can gang up on him, basically, with his magical power that he has. Melanie says, Toby Determined. That's the character's name? Oh my God. I'm so angry. Good God. All right. Sure. Good God. But yeah, Dipper walks into this like weird abandoned cabin, and it turns out that Gideon is there waiting for him, weirdly petting the hair and playing with a little Gideon doll that is sitting in his lap. And it's like so creepy. I just love it. And he says, this town has secrets that you couldn't comprehend. You turned Mabel against me. She was my peach dumpling. And then he levitates Dipper and throws him into a pile of boxes. And says, reading minds isn't all I can do. And Dipper is like, but you're a fake. And he's like, oh, really? And levitates a bunch of other stuff in the cabin. Meanwhile, poor Mabel is starting to get worried. And she's like trying to think about how exactly she can dump Gideon. And we get this amazing monologue with Wendy, she's like, have you ever broken up with somebody? And Wendy is just going off naming all of these different dudes that she has dumped, coming to realize that she actually may not have dumped this last guy. And that would explain why he keeps calling her. And she gets a call from him while they're talking, and she just sends it to voicemail. And I think that I love her. I'm just saying. Wendy is enjoyable. So yeah, that's a good moment. And Mabel decides that she is going to head over and talk to Gideon and actually dump him finally. And poor Dipper is trying to explain to him, no matter what you do to me, she is not going to be interested in dating you. And Mabel follows the trail and like finds him in this warehouse. I'm not even sure exactly how she knows exactly where he is, but she busts in and tells Gideon, listen, buddy, I can't date you. I'm not interested. And meanwhile, poor Dipper's still in midair and is like, hey, maybe don't say this to him right now because we just... And she's in the middle of telling him, but we can just we can still be makeover buddies, right? And Gideon says, do you really mean it? And she yanks off his amulet and is like, absolutely fucking not. I don't mean it. You were attacking my brother. Are you kidding me? And Gideon tries to leap at her brother. They both go flying out the window and they definitely would die, except that Mabel has the amulet and uses it to get both of them to hover about a foot off the ground. She says, I will never ever date you. She throws down the amulet and breaks it. And Gideon backs up and says, this isn't the last you'll see of whittle old me. And that is how he ends that with them. And I love it because it's so dumb and creepy and great. Meanwhile, Grunkle Stan finds out that the whole deal is off, and he goes running up out of there with a clown painting, because that is the one thing that he's getting out of this deal. So that's pretty much, I'm trying to think of what the end of it is. All of them, they're watching TV and they're joking around about how, oh, what is he even going to do to us? How, like, this little guy, what is he going? And then we go to him and he's like making a model house and little like voodoo dolls of each of them. And I am concerned that he is definitely going to be coming into play again. And I don't know how that would work. But then we get a pretty excellent finale after the credits of Seuss, and he is covered in bedazzles and spinning while Dipper shines a flashlight on him so that he behaves like a giant disco ball. And Grunkle Stan sits there and watches them and then finally just says, "You're all fired." And that is the end of that episode. So that was a good one. I really enjoyed that one. And I just, the whole thing with like girls trying to figure out exactly how dating works and what's expected of them and whether or not certain things are like okay or normal, or that's just really relatable to me. And it's hard to watch when you like Mabel so much and see she's so good-hearted and she doesn't want to hurt somebody's feelings. It's hard to watch her consider them so much and so deeply when they're not considering her at all, So, all right. The Inconveniencing is the next episode. And this is I really enjoyed this because of how totally weird it is to me. Like, how it starts off is great because really it comes down to Dipper has a crush on Wendy and he wants to impress her. And him having a crush on Wendy makes total sense. I love, guys, do you ever think back to when you were a kid and who you first got a crush on, who seemed like totally out of reach, and you realize that, maybe for Owen, for example, one of the people that he had a crush on first was a babysitter, and he, thinks of her in his head as being, 30 years old, but he realizes that she's probably only, 4 years older than him. But when you're that young, tiny little differences in age make an enormous difference in where you are in your life. And so it just felt like she was an adult when she probably wasn't even close to an adult. So Grunkle Stan is leaving. He asks Seuss and Wendy to wash the bathrooms. Seuss says that he absolutely will, and Wendy says absolutely not. And it's a little moment of Seuss is a good employee who wants to do the things that he is being told to do and paid to do. Whereas Wendy is just kind of dicking around. And it's one of those, I want to be mad at Wendy, but Grunkle Stan is such a complete fraud and so full of shit all the time that I have a really hard time holding her accountable for not doing her work when this is the guy that she works for. And I just have, because I am somebody who, when I work somewhere, I really try and put my best foot forward and probably overdo it sometimes, which is why I will often wind up getting given extra responsibilities, but not extra money, of course. And it winds up usually being bad for me in the end. But so I'm somebody who I really want to be the good employee. So in that respect, I feel for Seuss watching him doing what he is told, but then having to work with somebody else who really doesn't give a shit and being frustrated by that. However, Grunkle Stan, if anybody deserves an employee like Wendy, it's him. And she, it turns out, has a secret ladder up to the roof. And she goes up there and she has this whole little hangout on one of the eaves with a lawn chair and a cooler and a bucket of pine cones and an umbrella so that she can chuck pine cones at this target that she has taped up on a what are those called? Totem pole. So they're all in the middle of playing around and chucking these pine cones. And I love this moment. Dipper accidentally hits a car, and the alarm on the car starts going off. And he looks very chagrined by this. And Wendy's reaction is, nice one, high five. And she puts her hand up to get a high five from him. And he looks at her and sees her smiling at him with her hair blowing. And she says, don't leave me hanging. And I love this moment because it is like that, though. That when you are hanging out with somebody and all of a sudden you realize that you have a crush on them, there is a moment like that where all of a sudden you're like, oh, shit. And it can sneak up on you, you know? And clearly it snuck up on Dipper because I don't feel like he'd lie to his sister about liking Wendy. It's just that at this point he doesn't realize that it's pretty bad. Like, he really does like her. And it's not until later on when he's up and thinking about her after having just said, it's not like I lay awake at night thinking about her, that he realizes that this is actually going to be a problem. And like, that's the thing as well, as you'll have a moment where you're like, oh shit. But then you sort of like shrug it off and you're like, whatever, it's not a big deal. And then later you have like another thought about that person and you start to like realize, oh no, it is like that though. And it's one of those like, it's a terrible thing sometimes when you realize that, because the person that you feel like this about might not necessarily be available, or you might not necessarily be available, and you should not be having thoughts like this. But it's like a really, it's not something that you have control over necessarily, you know? So I still remember feeling like this about Owen and realizing like that I was like waiting to hear from him and like looking forward to talking to him and being like, oh, fuck. Like, it's reached that point. This is no good. So they're all sitting there on the roof, and her friends pull up in a van and summon her down. And she asks if they will keep the secret for her. And of course, Dipper is like 100% down to do whatever Wendy asks him to do. And she jumps off the roof and slides down a couple of pine trees in a pretty badass baller move that makes it even more obvious why Dipper would be like into her. And as they drive away, she's way out of hearing range by this point. Dipper's like, later, Wendy. And Mabel pounces on that shit immediately and is like, oh, you're in love. And he denies it and then realizes later that that is precisely what the fuck is happening. So I love the look on his face when he realizes it too. So he is, he wants to hang out with her friends. He is eager to pretend that he is older than he really is because he just wants to fit in and be given the opportunity to prove himself. And he tells her that they're 13 when in fact he's 12. I don't know if Mabel's even younger than him. I think she's like, because he keeps saying we're 13. Are they supposed to be twins? Or are they just supposed to be like brother and sister? Because I always have been assuming that Mabel's younger than him. And I'm realizing now that like I don't really have anything to base that on, except that she's slightly smaller than him when they stand next to each other and that he acts a little bit more mature. But regardless, this whole thing comes about because like they're dancing, Mabel and Wendy, and like having a good time. And Wendy is trying to convince Dipper to dance, and he says he doesn't dance. And Mabel talks at length about the Lammy dance. I'm particularly in love with this because when Owen and I were first talking, sometimes we would be talking really late, and I knew that I had to go to sleep, but I like couldn't sleep when I was still trying to talk to him, you know. And I would tell him to tell me a story. And he would tell me a story about Lammy, a little lamb character that he had invented. And Lammy's girlfriend, Lamela, And anything that's called Lammy, I'm just a big fan of. And he would wear this adorable little lamb costume and prance around and sing a song about grazing. And she even has a Polaroid photo of him in the costume. It's amazing. I love it. I'm so glad that this comes back up later. So Wendy is heading out with her friends, and Dipper stops her and is like, hey, maybe we could come and hang out with you too. And Wendy doesn't just reject him. She just stops and is like, guys, I don't know. I mean, and she says, my friends can be pretty intense. And also, like, how old are you? And he says, we're 13, so technically a teen. And she's like, all right, yeah. And she brings them with her. And they ask straight up if, like, she is babysitting. And she gets sort of defensive about the fact that they're, like, friends, not children, even though they are children. They're all children, let's be honest. But I kind of like the fact that when he asks if she's babysitting, she's just kind of like, hey, don't be a dick, you know? And this is a small thing, but I adore the moment when Mabel is trying to make fun of Dipper for, like, being into Wendy. And what he does is just smack the hair from the back of her head over the front of her face. It's such a stupid thing that would not work in real life. But as a cartoon thing, as somebody who is, like, right now my hair is pretty short, but I have had long hair most of my life, and it is very thick. And doing something like that to me, if it worked, would be, like, debilitating. Like, my hair, it would be so annoying. And I love that moment. It's so stupid, but I found that really funny. And she just keeps blowing raspberries from inside her hair. So her friends, Wendy's friends, are varying degrees of, like, slacker teens, right? We have the one girl who's, like, constantly on her phone. We have the one dude who tends to be, like, the one that is volunteered to do stupid, goofy stuff. We have the other two dudes who sort of back each other up on being, like, the real cut-ups. And then we have the one guy who really thinks he's just kind of emo and takes himself way too seriously. And Dipper introduces himself, and when they point out this friend that Robbie, he says something about how I'm the one who spray painted the water tower. And Dipper says, oh, yeah, you mean the big muffin? And Robbie gets all mad and says, it's a giant explosion. And then we look at the water tower, and it 100% looks like a muffin. And one of the guys says that and is, like, agreeing with Dipper. And that pretty much makes Robbie and Dipper enemies, as far as Robbie is concerned. That he did something that he thought was badass. And Dipper pretty much denigrated it completely with just, like, a word. And that his friends are buying into it. Which, I mean, Robbie, honestly, your friends might not buy into it so readily if you didn't seem like such a shit. But, you know, whatever. That's none of my business. So they all pile into the van, and they're looking for trouble, like, basically, as teenagers are wont to do. This is the thing about being a teen and wanting to be out of the, like, supervision of adults, but not being given anywhere to go, is that you have to just find pockets of, like, places that are not being supervised, and you wind up literally going into abandoned buildings and stuff to just be alone. And it is, there's not a good solution for that, because I always think, like, people will talk about, like, oh, well, we should have, like, community centers where they can go. No. The point isn't that they don't have anywhere to go. It's that they have nowhere to go to be by themselves outside of the supervision of adults. A community center is the opposite of what you want, right? You want to go somewhere where you can, like, make out with people or drink or do, you know, all of these experiments that teens do. I was not a teen drinker, but whatever. And as they're traveling over there, the inside of this van is so funny. Because, like, there's all of these different bits of graffiti all over the inside of the car. At one point, there's, like, "You suck" is, like, written on one of the side panels. And, oh my God, I was about to say Dipper. Mabel crosses it out and writes, "You look nice today." And then says, "This is going to blow someone's mind." But then later on, she's the one who sees it on the way home. And it's just like, what the hell is this? Like, totally not here for it, which I love both of those. I love the joke that she decides to do something really nice and blow someone's mind. And then I love the fact that in a different frame of mind, this very joke that she thought was great, actually, she finds very irritating. And she's in the middle of trying to say, "Are you mad that I'm going to embarrass you in front of your girlfriend?" And she starts to say it really loud. And Dipper claps his hand over her mouth and then pulls his hand away. And it's like, "Did you just lick my hand?" Everyone, I'd like to say for the record that this was the moment that I knew that me and Mabel were soulmates. Because Owen occasionally will try and joke around with me by doing something like this, like clamping his hand over my mouth. And inevitably, licking his hand is what I do. Because, and he doesn't do it often enough that he remembers that's how I react. And there is no surer way to get somebody to go, "Ah!" than to feel your wet, slimy tongue sliding along the palm of their hand. Now, yes, you're taking a risk because people's hands are disgusting and licking it is a risk. But if you don't want their hand over your mouth, let me tell you, that's going to work. It's just gonna. So I love this moment so much. And when he says, "Did you just lick my hand?" and how she's just smiling at him completely placidly. So, guys, here we come to my favorite joke of maybe the entire show so far. Grunkle Stan is watching TV and he sees that they're moving into period piece old lady boring movie channel, and he wants to switch the channel, but he can't find the remote, and he's yelling for the kids to come and bring him the remote, but he is unwilling to get up to change the channel. So it continues on telling him what's happening. I have to read this verbatim because it was just so good. "Stay tuned for the Friday night movie The Duchess Approves, starring Storley Stemmelburgess as the Duchess and Grampton St. Rumpterfrabble as the risible coxswain. Saunter Blugget Hampshire Saunterbluget Hampshire. The Duchess Approves. Gowns by Peppy." Oh my God, guys, it's so good. It's so great. I love it. I love it so much. I could not stop fucking cackling. And then it turns out, of course, after being forced to watch this, that Grunkle Stan gets very invested and is super into it. And it's obviously meant to be sort of like a, what do you call it? Like Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility sort of thing, where there's lots of romance and like veiled barbs and things like that. And it's just, it pays off so much, this joke going on. But I only have 5 minutes left, so I'm not going to talk about that anymore because we have to talk about the haunted convenience store. They see this place. It was condemned, and nobody really knows why. But when we go in there, it's like everything is still like on its shelves. There's still donuts in the cases and stuff. And rumor has it that a couple of people died in there, and people think that it's murder and that it is haunted, and that's why it was condemned. And they look at the place, and like Wendy's trying to say, it's not as bad as it looks. But there's a sign that says, "No trespassing, violators will be dead." And they climb the fence to get to it, and the front doors are locked. And this is what Dipper does to prove himself that he is totally cool like everybody else. And he climbs up the roof and like gets inside the building and goes down and opens the doors from the inside. And he does this and specifically shows up Robbie, who has been convinced that Dipper wouldn't be able to do it and who himself could not open the doors. And clearly Robbie has kind of a thing for Wendy also, and I don't know that he knows that Dipper is into Wendy too, or if he just feels like he's being shown up by a little kid and that's just not good overall. So they're all standing in there and looking around, and the "we're closed" sign turns, and we get little hints throughout as they investigate everything that's left on the shelves that there is something else in this building with all of them. And it's really like funny to me, all of the silly convenience store things that they find to do. And there's still stuff like there's still ice in the ice machine. There's still candy. There's all kinds of stuff. And they are all dicking around and eating and pouring ice down, I think Thompson is his name, pants. And at one point Dipper goes into the freezer and he sees this like weird floating brain thing, which I'm not even convinced that actually is the ghosts. Like, it doesn't feel like it's really connected, but there's something going on. Meanwhile, like, they're all, doing food fights and everything. Meanwhile, Mabel is literally just eating a ton of this fucking candy and is high as balls on sugar. Like, it's supposed to be that this candy was actually they stopped production of it. It's meant to be Fun Dips, if you guys have ever had those, which are basically like a candy stick that's similar to like a sweet tart that you lick and then you dunk it into a pouch of sour powder, kind of like what coats a Sour Patch Kid, and you lick them off. And I remember these things very acutely, and they are just, it's a lot of sugar. So there's the implication that maybe it's not just sugar that's in this thing, because she is flipping out and is imagining that she's riding on the back of a shark that has muscled arms, and then the arms flip out and open, and each of the arms has mouths on the end. Like, it's really intense. So she's like kind of lost to the world for a minute. Meanwhile, everyone else is in the middle of like playing video games or messing around with like lottery tickets that are left over, and they come across a couple of outlines of bodies on the floor, chalk marks. And Robbie dares one of the dudes to step in it. And Dipper tries to draw the line, but everybody's like, dude, you're totally a buzzkill. What are you doing? So Dipper's like, fine. And he steps into it and activates the ghost thing. And we find out that the ghosts are an old Ma and Pop. Now, at first, it looks like Mabel has been like possessed, because she seems to be like floating in the air and talking in this voice. But we find out that it's just the ghosts like holding her up, and that's not what's going on at all. And it's this old man and woman who they hate teenagers. And when these two come in there and say that and see that there are all these teenagers around, they want to lock the place down and kill all of them because they hate teenagers. So Dipper tells them, he admits that he is not technically a teenager. And that causes them to slow down and listen to him. And he asks what happened. And they say that they tried to ban teens from their store because they were so disrespectful and whatnot. And they remember the day they retaliated with this newfangled rap music. The lyrics were so hateful. Homework's whack and so are rules. Tuck it in your shirts for fools. And the two of them yell, no! And then they are both struck with double heart attacks because they're so shocked by these profane lyrics. Guys, this is so good. I love it so much. So yeah, they go down and are now haunting the store and want to take out their revenge on teenagers. So what does Dipper have to do? He has to do a dance. And one of the ghosts is able to basically summon the exact costume, the Lammy costume. And he does the Lammy dance. And he saves them all. And to cover, because he had to do something incredibly embarrassing, Wendy generously tells her friends that Dipper went at the ghosts with a bat and drove them off because they were like so scared of him. And that's how he defeated them. And she does not tell them that, in fact, it was a terrible, humiliating thing that he had to do. So I am over time, but that was the end of that episode. That was a really fun one. The Lammy dance. Melanie says, one more thing for episode 4. Did you see what Gideon closes during the end sequence? During the end sequence, I thought that was the one where Seuss is just, is spinning around as a ball. And I saw that he was making little figures of them. But other than that, no, I don't think so. What he closes. Oh, wait, yes, that he has the book. He has the other book that, what's his face, that Dipper found in the woods. I forgot all about that. Right. Because Dipper says like 4 or something, 3. And the one that Gideon has says 2, right? I don't remember what number is on the one that Dipper has. But, yeah, so I totally forgot about that. So I guess we haven't seen the last of Gideon. And I'm kind of glad, because Gideon's a really good character. And I really as much as I hate him, I really want to see what happens with him. So, but yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Melanie, because I totally forgot about that. Okay, I'm going to go, but thank you guys very much for hanging out with me. Shortly, we will be doing the next episode of Dark, so come hang out with me for that. And I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.